What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Emperor Atheist channel with your host, Emperor Atheist. Before I start on this video, thanks for all my new subscribers. Thanks for all my old subscribers. All my likes, dislikes. Thank you for sharing my videos. And please continue to share my videos. And continue to be a part of not just my fight to normalize atheism, but all of our fights. All of the different atheist vloggers on YouTube. All of the atheist debaters out in the world, all of the the atheists who basically have platforms, who are speaking up against the illogical position of religion, standing up against religious bullying, trying to get religion into our schools to basically brainwash future generations of our children. We don't need it. We really don't need it. That's why I always say give shots out. Give big shots out to people like Aaron Ra, who actually stands up against these things on the political side of it. Robert Price, different people, man, who are going at these things. Dan Barker, who I just interviewed, Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is a good foundation, man, that actually have lawyers to actually fight against these things. If you have children or anybody kids who are being bullied with religion, prayer, or being forced some type of way with any type of religious views, these foundations, Dan Barker Foundation, these foundations are here, they lawyers are here to make sure we keep the separation of church and state. But anyway, man, in particularly, this particular video is basically what I've been saying, but I just wanted to be more specific, I guess. This video is about why Christian apologetics, why Christian scholars, and not only apologists and Christian scholars, but just even your normal lay Christians, why are their beliefs and their apologetics and their scholarship so illogical, such a failure? Basically, that's basically what I'm saying. Why is this such a failure? I mean, for the most part, y'all know I've made a lot of videos debunking different philosophical arguments for this God, whether it be a Christian God, Islamic God, because Muslims use the same argument to try to prove their Allah, the Quran. But I've debunked these I did a series on debunking these particular philosophical arguments. Other people have too. A lot of other people have. Rationality Rules, Cosmic Skeptic. We go on and on and on. Different people who's actually vloggers. Aaron Ra, who's definitely done a great job at debunking things like Noah's flood, debunking young Earth creationist views. Destroying it, not just debunking it. He's been destroying it for a while now. Different other people in debates, whether it's Dan Barker, whether it's Matt Dillahunty, or whoever, Sam Harris. But basically, I was talking about mostly the main YouTube vloggers who actually have been tackling these ridiculous philosophical arguments for a long time now. Prophet Azad now, different people. But the thing is, and I just supposedly had a debate with a guy named Wolf Bitten Jewel, whoever he was, and he didn't show up, whatever. So this guy named Uncle Sam takes his place. But I'll speak on that later, and a lot of the illogical things and beliefs that he was speaking about. But this is the thing, man. When you look at these philosophical arguments and these, what I call excuses for this particular God, almost every single argument and every single, whether it's Christian apologetic site or book, it basically is a lapse of logic. These people don't seem to respect the laws of logic. It's almost like when you run into these arguments and this lapse of logic basically renders the whole thing worthless. I mean, we often get caught up in arguments about the details of Christianity, but what use is it arguing the details when the foundation of those particular details is basically, constructed of circular arguments, false premises, unsupported evidence. Basically, they are unsupported leaps of logic. And yeah, I am one who argue. I love to basically argue details of Christianity, because from I guess from the outset and for the most part, basically Christians believe that their book is a perfect book of God. And once you expose that book as not being a perfect book of God, once you expose the contradictions in that book and expose the inconsistencies, then they have to run for another shelter. And this is what basically happened in this little, I don't even call it a debate I had with this guy named Uncle Sam, just a discussion. He ran for shelter. He had to run for another shelter. Once he had to, I basically made him say, well, don't worry about the Bible. It's all about God. And then he started saying God is a spirit. And what evidence would it take for you to prove this God? All these illogical things. Of course, never brought any evidence. Started talking about spirits and all of these spook type metaphysical terms that science has no way to acknowledge. And why should it? These things don't exist. And so basically, once I attacked that foundation, then he had to go into other things. He even started saying things like, as long as you're born again. And I was like, what do you mean by born again? He like, well, just be born again, you know, ask God and all of this ridiculous stuff. It was very incoherent. But then I made him get to the point where he said, well, it doesn't matter if you're Christian. Anybody could just be born again with God and they'll be accepted into heaven. So basically, without even going into it, I basically showed how he disregarded all of the Christian foundation, because any Christian apologist or scholar will tell you that it's not just about being born again, but it's about being so-called born again, or the renewal of the mind through the belief that this particular Jesus Christ died for your sins. This is your salvation through Jesus Christ. So basically, he just destroyed all of the Christian tenets and foundations that he claims to be a part of. But anyway, this is just a part of the incoherence that you're going to keep running into with these people. It's kind of sad. It's pathetic. You know, it kind of reminds me, basically, trying to keep arguing with these Christians, which I am, because it's fun to me. But it kind of reminds me of the story. I don't know if y'all familiar with this story, but it's a story of these two hunters. It's just a little like old story. These two hunters that basically came across these tracks in the woods. So they started arguing about what type of animal made these tracks. So while these two is going back and forth about what type of animal made these tracks, they both got hit and killed by a train. They were train tracks. So basically, you know, often basically what the argument is saying, often the arguments that we are having basically about these details start off on the wrong track. So that's basically the sum of that story. I just thought that was I read that in a book years ago. I forgot what book it was, but it was just a good example of how even the starting point is illogical. And basically the starting point with Christians and the things that they say to try to make their arguments work are pathetic. And basically, you know, when you think about it, and basically what I'm talking about, the total lack of evidence for specific claims basically made by Christianity outside of the Bible. You know, the absolute best you can do is establish that there probably was an actual Jesus. Like I always said, I'm not a Christ myth. My friend Robert Price is. But outside of the Bible, that's about the best you can do. You can say, well, there probably was a Jesus or Yahshua that these people started this religion about. You know, but in retrospect to that, you know, the Bible itself is not evidence. It's the claim being evaluated. A claim cannot be evidence on its own truthfulness. And this is what Christians and even Muslims don't understand. And that is the lapse of logic made by every apologist, believer, scholar I've ever heard. And, you know, like I know y'all seen a lot of these debates, especially with a lot of apologists look up to, I think his name, Mike Lacona. He had this debate with Bart Ehrman. He's debated this with several people. William Lane Craig has debated this particular subject of Jesus, for just one example, of Jesus resurrecting from the dead. And, you know, I don't know, does it seem like it's something I'm missing when I'm listening to these people saying this garbage is evidence? Because when you think about it, when you outside of the Bible, any external evidence, what evidence do you have that Jesus died and resurrected? None. Absolutely none. But this is the mindset of Christian apologists, not just William Lane Craig and people like Mike Lacona, but just this is the training. This is when they're going through these theological seminaries. This is the training that they have to have. This is the mindset that they take on to actually keep these lies going. And it's sad, man. It's really sad because like I said, when you look at all of the arguments, I don't care which ones you look at, whether it's the cosmological argument for God, or cosmological argument, or the the moral argument for God, the theological argument for God, the whatever argument, the transcendental argument, the tag argument. I mean, all of these arguments, and like I've always said, all of these arguments, they're not evidence. They're not evidence. I mean, so you know, I always have to straighten that. All of these arguments are just arguments. Any argument in and of itself is just that. It's not evidence what it's called. But Christian, I guess you could say, Christian philosophy over the centuries have had to come up with something to account for basically the BS in the Bible, the BS in their theology. So they have to weave these particular, try to do these particular arguments. People like Thomas Aquinas and Immanuel Kant and Amsel of Canterbury and all of these other people, Godfrey, Leibniz, different people over the years who had to keep coming up, all the way up to Alvin Plantinga and the modern day William Lane Craig and so forth and so on. And these people continue to weave these garbage, illogical arguments and continue to be debunked. Now, it's like when you ask a Christian a question, because we know they can't prove any resurrection story. And like I say, I always say this, and I always make certain points, even with the New Testament. I don't even have to go to the Old Testament because, as a matter of fact, I should, but I won't in this video. But matter of fact, a associate of mine from the Great Debate community, Dr. Eric Comfort, he put a post in the Great Debate community not so long ago dealing with Joshua's conquest. I had a debate about this on Facebook probably about 3 or 4 months ago. And basically, and Dr. Eric Comfort is a very sharp dude, man, out of the UK, but he's in the Great Debate community. And basically, and those of you familiar with the Joshua conquest, this conquest that should have lasted about over a period of about 4 or 5 years. And all of these Canaanite cities, these people were killed and things were turned over and taken over. Well, the thing about it, and this should have happened basically, as far as the chronology of it, should have happened right after the so-called Jews came out of Egypt, but we know we don't have evidence of that. But anyway, around basically, I'd say around, we just give a rough take, say 1400 BCE. But the thing about it, man, this area have been combed by archaeologists, professional archaeologists, experts of the field for years and years, and checked by other archaeologists to come back to make sure that the first archaeologists didn't make a mistake. What basically happens is that the conquest of Joshua, according to all of the experts in the field, and I'm gonna leave these links in this video for this. I didn't even mean to bring this up, but I just wanted to bring it up. Anyway, just for people, when they come out their mouth when you hear Christians say, well, archaeology, the Bible, and archaeology proves itself. That's a damn lie. Archaeology disproves the Bible. We don't have to get on Noah's flood. It's just other things. All of these stories in the Bible, most of these stories are made up by men who just wrote things. But anyway, the experts say that, and there's a lot of these experts who were Christian at the time who actually left their faith because they've realized that this story, this conquest of Canaan by Joshua just never happened. It's something that was an historical lie. Even trying to move the time marker from another century to another century, some experts tried to move it back 150 years. It still wouldn't account for Jericho or the city of Ai, as told in the stories in the Bible. And it definitely wouldn't add up with these children of Israel coming out of some bondage in Egypt. It just didn't make no sense, especially since some of these areas that they so-called went into were provinces of Egypt. So they would run from Egypt just to run into a province of Egypt. It wouldn't make sense. And like I said, I'm going to put my links and what and things I said on this particular subject, and what other experts said on this particular subject. And I'm going to put in what Dr. Eric Comfort even shared in the group. I'm going to put that in the link too, now that I just spoke it up. But just going back to the New Testament, because most of my study was from New Testament. Herod, for example, King Herod, who claimed that when Jesus was born, according to Matthew, he sent out a decree to kill all of these Hebrew children. Now, a lot of preachers and experts and scholars and apologists don't like to talk about this part. I've already spoken about the contradiction that no scholar or apologist has ever reconciled with the contradiction between Jesus being born during Herod and then Jesus being born 10 years after Herod was died, according to Luke. We don't even have to go there anymore. I'm still waiting on people to respond. And I wrote Frank Turek about years ago. He never responded. I've written different preachers about this and evangelists who've never responded to me on this. So we won't even get off into that because they know they can't respond. But just the story of Herod sending out a decree to kill Hebrew children, because you know the story of him sending his wise men, whatever you want to call them, Magi's, to go look for Jesus. All of these Hebrew boys died. Now, this is the thing about that. We know this never happened in history because during this particular time, we had contemporary historians during the time of Herod. Philo of Judea, Seneca, Pliny the Elder. We had plenty. Josephus even wrote about an extensive. He wrote an extensive writing. Tacitus, the Roman historian Tacitus, they wrote extensively on Herod and never mentioned anything like that. Now, just use your brain right here. If something like that was an evil thing, same thing is basically mirroring the story of Moses, but the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh tried to kill all the Hebrew boys under 2 and all this garbage in the Old Testament. And this is how Moses, his mother wanted to save him, so she sent him down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter just happened to get him and raise him in Pharaoh's house. I mean, if you believe that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but it's the same mirrored story. You can see that it's a copycat story that whoever the author of Matthew was just inserted it in the New Testament. But Christian scholars know they can't get around these particular ridiculous, illogical beliefs. Nowhere in the history, no historian ever mentioned anything like that. Why do you think the historians would have missed that, but yet they got all of the other crazy stuff Herod did? So, I mean, it's things like that that basically shows. And the resurrection. Outside of the Bible, we have no evidence of any resurrection of any Jesus Christ. Christian apologists, or these so-called people who want to be apologists, only thing they go on and say, well, you know, we had witnesses. What witnesses? What witnesses actually witness it? You can't use the Bible as a proof of these witnesses. And this is the problem. This is the circular tree that you keep circling around and cutting the bark off. So it's I'm not gonna say it's a waste of time, even though it is a waste of time to keep talking to a lot of these apologists. But we have to keep talking to these people and making these videos, because actually some people are listening, and people are going to eventually break away from this terrible thing we call religion. So yeah, we have to push back bad ideas. We have to continue to push back these bad ideas, regardless of stupid arguments and debates we get into with these people. I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to continue to debate these Christians, young Earth creationists, which are really pathetic to me. I'm going to keep talking about them. I'm going to keep debating them, and because people listen, you know, people listen on both sides. So I think it's very important to keep pushing back these bad ideas, and this is why Christian apologetics are failing. And this is the thing about Christian apologetics and arrogant Christian scholars. People like John Links. This is why I talk about people like John Links and William Lane Craig. When you look on a lot of sites, you'll see, I don't know if y'all familiar with this, a particular site called Answering Islam. And because I look into, a lot of times I go into sites where I look at Christian scholars and how they defend their belief against Islam and vice versa. And the most strange thing to me about this is that the same arguments that these so-called Muslim scholars use to claim that the Quran is from the one and almighty God, and that Prophet Muhammad was the last prophet, and all of this, and that this is why you should be Muslim, you know, so on and so forth. The same arguments that Christians use toward us are the same arguments that Muslims use that Christians deny. That alone should tell you that any argument, philosophical argument, to try to make a particular God the right God, or a particular religion the right religion, should all be thrown in the trash. Because, and like I said this before, the cosmological argument, the Kalam cosmological argument, proves exactly what God? Well, it proves no God. But let's just go a step further and say, if you say that the cosmological argument, just for example, we use the cosmological argument, and if we say everything in the universe begins to exist, okay, or everything in the universe that began to exist had a cause, and the universe has a cause, okay, therefore what is that cause? Basically you get down to say that cause is God. Okay, let's go on and agree with these first two faulty premises. Let's go ahead and agree with them. What God did it prove? Did it actually prove your biblical God? The God of Abraham, who was so intelligent and so smart, he had to go tell his man to kill his son to show how much faith he had in him? How ignorant is that? What kind of God did it prove? Did it prove the God of the Quran? Did it, a God that would promise his faithful, his mu'minun, that they would have virgins in heaven? If they, so what? Just tell me what God did it prove? Did it prove the Greek God, Zeus? So that's very problematic for anybody. Same thing with the moral argument for God. Whoever wants to use it can use it. The Muslims can use it. The Hindus can use it. You say that there's no objective. There's no objective morality without God. What God? So this is a problem. So I don't know. I met my uncle around there doing some damn wood, son. He studied adding another room to my house. It's cool. Keep going, uncle, but you're too loud. But this is a problem. But once again, man, I don't know what else to say. Except, like I said, we got to keep pushing back these bad ideas, man. Once again, I'm the Emperor Atheist. I'm out. Peace.